see you.
And Val my show too. I was, hey everyone, welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing. With me is the smarter, better looking of everybody's Holly. Followed by the equally smart but not near as good looking or socially acceptable or brilliant.
All appropriate.
Mr. Edward St. Ange from Flip2 and myself, Lauren Gray. Show number 190. We're rudderless in the sea of no Robert content. I mean, Robert Cole, who has been now for I think the past year our perennial topic finder for the show, is off. I don't understand this logic, but friends before family. I don't know. Family before friends.
Whatever.
Family friends. Yeah,
something about traveling Italy, northern Italy, with his wife and daughter. I mean,
I thought he was at the Venetian in Vegas.
He's totally at the Venetian. He's so faking it.
I thought he was at Epcot, just going through Italy.
Okay, he may have patchworked some pictures from previous trips together. No, it looks like he's actually loving life and enjoying himself, which is well overdue.
Honestly, it looks like an amazing trip.
Although we all know, because we've known Robert long enough to know that he's going to come back with some story where he will crucify whatever hotelier may have made a tiny mistake on his trip, and he will. Yeah, I feel bad.
Yeah. But we anxiously await it.
Yeah. Yep. And I even tried to talk to him about the fact that he was being so methodical or logical about his traveling, and he didn't even check the humor. Because for those who don't follow Robert personally on Facebook, and it's fun to follow him because he has some very insightful, witty comments, a lot of stuff. He basically broke down the entire history of the Romeo and Juliet balcony.
Yeah.
And, the history and why it's fake and why it's not real and why we should be, why all these people are standing around and so forth. And when I tried to tag him on, it's like, dude, you probably have a pivot table on that. He actually came back and says, well, yes, I do. I have it broken down by days and this. I'm like, no, your wife should be a freaking saint for putting up with the way you logically attack the world. Hey, Holly, so since we haven't had you forever, what's been going on, man?
I felt really guilty about not being here. And so I mean, you both know how it is to own your own company. It's all you. Like
it's a bit tougher, right?
I mean, I do my web, I do my accounting.
I'm doing our deposit as we're talking, by the way. Because we have a new accounting person starting in 10 days. So I've been having to do accounting work. Leading up to it. Yeah.
You just wear a million different hats. And I thought, I need to, I love being on this show. I try and tune in even when I'm not on it. But I thought I need to make the time. So I did. Here I am. I don't know if I'm going to add anything because I am a little bit out of the digital marketing loop. Although I actually have a guy coming to the HSMAI sales advisory board meeting.
Okay.
And the digital marketing folks are coming as well. He works for a company called Collective Eye, which does a CRM utilizing AI. So, hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
You're muted. So I'm bringing him in to show everybody what's possible with AI, as opposed to, I mean, it's not what's possible. It's a company that exists that's working. But just to show everybody, it's actually real what can happen with the stuff. So that's the extent of my digital engagement of late.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, actually, I would love to expound on that because having just come back, as Tim did too, from the Curate program in wonderful Nashville, which was a lot of fun. Nashville, we had some pretty cool stuff. We get to share some cool stories about that. Tim and I got to do some cool stuff. But and Tim should have been in heaven with the music stuff. But the AI was such a focus of a discussion.
Well, because it's a buzzword, so we know the industry loves to talk about buzzwords.
Well, but it's also could be helpful.
It is helpful. It's not could be.
Tim's still on mute. Tim's still on mute. I would say it's a buzzword, but there is some traction to some conversation. If that's
it's in use.
Yeah,
AI is in use in a lot of ways.
That's why I'm bringing this guy in. And in fact, I'll have him on the show if you want.
You should.
Yeah. He's really interesting in what they're doing with this. It's
Are they doing anything in hospitality or?
Nope, not one thing, which is why I wanted him to come and speak to this group.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Hi, Tim. Can you talk now?
Somehow,
Tim,
he can't even hear.
Can you even hear?
He's gone.
Away.
We've offended him.
You have offended the Timster.
Somehow actually, I've turned on some notifications, so every time Tim tweets anything, I get notified.
Wow!
It's actually
so you're like totally into Tim's.
It's a hack that Tim has done, so everyone gets notified.
Yeah, I don't know where I flipped that switch, but fortunately, he always tweets interesting stuff.
Tim's joining back in. See, Tim also knows the challenge of being an entrepreneur, except he never takes care of his IT.
He has people.
He's wise.
People. Tim, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
There he is. Now we can hear you.
There you go.
Long time, Tim.
Long time, Ed. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Nice to be seen.
Looking good, Billy Ray. Looking good.
Feeling good.
Feeling good. Good to see you as well, Ed. And as well as you, Holly. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
She was exonerating the love that she has for running her own business, the diversity of resources she has, that she just sits back and does nothing and lets other people do all the minion work.
Feet up on a chair. She's like, how great is it to be my own boss?
Yeah, what? Another camera cameo? Okay, I must walk over here.
Exactly. Getting your nails done, eating bonbons, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Life's grand. Just outside with the dogs in the pool. It's all good. So, Tim, actually, I was talking about the fact with the Curate and the AI. Tim, you get to tell the story. How was Curate?
I thought Curate was good. I thought the AI discussion was solid, if unspectacular. It was broken into two pieces, and there was an outside speaker who I thought did a good overview of what AI is and where it has real opportunities to make a difference, as we go forward. And then I thought there was a solid internal discussion using people from the hospitality industry, which kind of highlights the fact that within the industry itself, we haven't seen much progress yet, right? And the reason is...
The reason is because the industry has a data problem.
Correct. That's exactly right. That is precisely the problem. In fact, I feel bad saying this because this is me quoting somebody quoting me from a conversation we had, right? But the internal presenter. Right, but it's weird to quote yourself. It's odd to quote.
If you use somebody else.
Right, yeah. So I'm quoting somebody who was actually quoting me from a conversation we had ahead of time. It is a data problem, right? The issue is we don't have great data. We don't tend to have that data all in one place. And
you're being very kind.
Right. The data generally tends to be all over the place and not in terribly usable formats and things along those lines. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day in the industry, and they were talking about building a data warehouse. And they had this entire plan. Oh, Ed, yeah, exactly. And they had this entire plan. And all I thought was, wow, this is a really good plan for 2003.
Who builds data warehouses anymore?
Correct. Right. Exactly. The term du jour is a data lake, if you're familiar with that, which is basically take all your data, throw it in one place where you can point useful tools at it, and don't worry about the formats because the AI can sort that out if you actually have the data all in one place.
Right. And then those projects completely fall apart as soon as they go to their PMS vendor and say, hey, we'd like all this data flowing out.
Right.
And the PMS vendor goes, okay.
Right.
Why are you telling us?
Right. So
we don't do that.
So we've seen, I've seen, I think you all know this. I don't think I'm saying anything I haven't said before. I'm a partner in a software company where we're doing AI, but we're not.
That.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
You clearly are not on his notification, though.
Actually, Ed does know that. I got confused, and then I was like, wait a second, we had calls with you, man.
Some people were omitted from the Tim Peter fan club just on purpose, just saying.
No. And we haven't yet turned our attention to the hospitality industry, not because we don't think there's some cool problems to solve there, but because it's a data problem, right? There just aren't enough instances where the data's in a great state to actually turn AI onto it and make it do what it needs to do.
What industries are you in?
We are primarily working with large B2B companies who have, immense. I can't name the specific Actually, I can name one. We're doing work with UL. UL is a so if you know Underwriters Laboratories, they are no longer called that. They're now just called UL.
Because Underwriters sounds so scary.
Yeah, exactly. But they have immense amounts of data in various states and the like, and we're using them as an alpha client for the product to actually determine the value of their content and how well the content actually contributes towards moving people through the customer journey, right? So there's some cool stuff there. And I don't think we're doing the coolest things of anything I've ever seen out there by any stretch. We're doing a useful thing, which I think is the other place.
That's the coolest part, though. That's the thing. A lot of the cool stuff you're seeing being done with data is not all that useful.
Right. That's right. Well, the other side of it, and this is where I thought the discussion from SAS was very good at Curate, was a lot of the useful stuff that's being done isn't terribly sexy, and that's okay.
Yes.
Right? Like there's some really cool AI stuff being done in the useful sense that's kind of behind the scenes, back office, under the hood, but interesting and terribly useful, in terms of making people's experience better, in terms of making people's lives better, frankly. I just want to give credit to Kimberly, right? Kimberly, I believe was her name, the presenter. I didn't write down her name. I apologize. But the presenter from SAS talked about you can use AI three ways. And I thought this was a great way to frame this. You can refactor, meaning you can optimize existing processes, perform existing tasks better, etc. You can reinvent, which is improve how core products and services are created and delivered. And that's kind of the space that the group that I'm working with is playing. And then the place that all the cool stuff lies that we just haven't really gotten to yet is reimagine, right? It's the proverbial greenfield in which the very nature of the industry, product or service undergoes a fundamental rethink. And she gave some really interesting examples, all of which are outside the hospitality industry.
Part of that's because in order to reimagine with AI as the core of the reimagining is it requires an amazing amount of scale. Mm-hmm. And in the hospitality industry, there are not many entities that have enough scale.
That's right.
For reimagined AI to start with.
Right. I think the place we're likely to see that is going to be the OTAs.
Right. Which then none of us know about because they're doing it for themselves.
Correct.
And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But she gave a cool example where, for instance, this was, and again, my note on this one is a little spotty, but I remember her talking about it, and I thought the idea was very cool when you talk about reimagine, where Volvo is rethinking how they do maintenance on cars and trucks, fleet management and things along those lines. So basically, the cars know enough to turn themselves in to be serviced before they need to be serviced so that you minimize downtime. Right. You improve trucking efficiency and things along those lines, and you're rethinking the whole concept of change your oil every 3,000 miles or whatever the trucking equivalent is. It's right. You change your oil when the car knows the oil needs to be changed. Right. Yep. And it's a neat concept. So, but to be fair, Kimberly from SAS said, and I think she's right on this, almost nobody's really doing that today. That's more of the stuff where it will get cooler as we go forward, but we're not really there yet. We're mostly seeing refactor and reinvent where we're seeing people do it.
Yep.
But I believe the good news is it's going to be here faster than we imagined that phase. I mean, I think it'll move a little bit quicker.
So it's funny. There's a slide I use all the time, and somebody else used it in their presentation. I don't remember who did, but there's an old Bill Gates quote that I use constantly, which was, we always overestimate the change we will see in the next 2 years and underestimate the change we will see in the next 10.
Yep.
I jokingly refer to, I always have to explain this to people, but I always jokingly refer to in 5 years, and I always use air quotes around it, because what I mean by that is somewhere between 2 and 10. It's probably not going to happen next year, probably not going to happen the year after that.
Well, if you want to
happen 10 years
if you want an interesting reminder of how much things change in that length of time, is CNN just recently released their 2000s series. So, they do the Generation series.
Right.
Seriously, watch it.
I have to watch it.
Through 3 of the episodes, and I'm sitting here going, wow, Like you look at the video from 2002, 2003, there's no smartphone in anyone's hands. Like there's the internet. They're still talking about the internet becoming freely available and changing the perspective of like the economies. Holy smokes, that was not that long ago.
No. Well, it's, you know, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said it's crazy to me that we're closer to 2025 than we are to 2010.
Yeah.
Right. And we're closer to 2030 than we are to 2000.
Yes. And
yes, we are.
Yes,
I
we
do
are.
the math there for a second.
Yes, we are.
Mathematically, you are correct.
There's a story I tell in a talk that I give.
Hold on.
There's a story I tell in a talk that I give.
Holly said, "Hold on, Tim." I think
okay. No, go ahead.
She wants us to stop talking until she returns.
No, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Okay, so you go back about 100 years, roughly. You know, you talk to the average person in London, and they would have claimed to be Victorian, right? They were Victorians. That's the world in which they grew up, right? Except that Queen Victoria had died almost 20 years prior.
Yep.
And so it becomes this question of which century do you choose to live in?
Right.
We're not the product of the 90s. We're not the product of the 80s. We're not the product of the 70s or 60s. You know, many of us were alive at those times. And, you know, many of us, not Ed, were working adults at some of those times.
I was a working adult in 2001.
In 2001, but not the 90s.
No.
Right.
I was a working child.
You know, exactly. But, you know, it's 2019. I mean, we are very much in the 21st century. Which century do you choose to live in? This is the last little line I'll give from one of these talks that I do. But it's basically, you know, the most dangerous thing you can say is back in my day. Because if today is not your day, it's time for you to get out.
Mm-hmm.
What?
If today's not your day, leave, Holly.
When you say back in my day, you're saying you're not participating in the world as it is. You are participating in the world as it was. Right.
But can't you have learned something from how it was? Sorry, I'm looking for something.
Of course you can.
It's really important to forget history. That's been said time and time again. In order to be successful in life, you need to completely forget everything that happened up until that point. Right? That's how the saying goes.
That's the message I want to make sure people take from this. That's always very important to me. No, it's this idea that, you know, that we must know history. One of the best things you can say, right, is in my experience, this is so. Which means,
or when I was your age is a good one to lead with.
That's fine too.
When I was your age,
but that's something where you're saying this has been my experience. What also is implied by that, and what you should mean by that is that doesn't mean it remains true. It may be true. We need to test that. We need to check and make sure whether or not it's still true. But I'm not saying this is a universal truth just because it was true 20 years ago or 10 years ago or last year. And it means in my experience, we did this. Now let's see if that's still true.
And I guess the reason I say that is in my one of my classes, I always say, back when I was selling hotels in DC, and this was the 90s, there used to be one decision maker for the World Bank in DC who controlled 30,000 room nights into the market.
Right.
I mean, you got on Antonine's good side, and she changed your life. I mean, you know, she certainly changed your business life.
Sure.
And today, 17 people are involved with a $25,000 decision.
Right. I'm sure I've told this.
Do you know how many people are involved in my $4,000 decision? I mean, it's insane.
How many?
On average, it's 6.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But that's the average of any business decision.
That's $4,000 a year. I'm talking.
Yeah. The average business decision is 6.8 people now.
Well, it's funny that you guys will like this story. I may have told it on the show before, but since we're talking about how much things have changed and how fast, when I was recruited to Wyndham, to what was then Cendant, let's be really clear about what the company was, right? I was recruited to Cendant. It was a blind recruiter. I didn't know who the company was. And as they're talking about this, you know, it's a hotel company in Phoenix. I said, well, there are only 2 that I really know of, and my wife works for one of them. And will that be a problem? And the recruiter said, you know, I'm not supposed to tell you the name of the company, but yes, it is Cendant. Let me make a couple of calls and check and see if this is going to be an issue. This is 2001, right? And she calls me back a couple days later, the recruiter, and she said, "Oh, no, your wife is involved with the GDS, and you'll be running things on the internet, and those have nothing to do with
each other."
Okay.
That actually happened.
Wow. Well, because if you remember back then, the internet was going to eliminate the GDS.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I mean, it's just amazing how much has changed, how quickly. But we also have to, we want to know history. We want to learn history. Ed is absolutely right to call out the possible misinterpretation of that, but that's absolutely valid.
Right.
We also have to understand that the world we live in is not the world we have always lived in.
Right.
And AI is a perfect example of that. It is changing the way things happen and will continue to change the way things happen. But the big limiting factor is the data side.
It is true.
Go ahead, Holly.
Sorry, I've been reading this thing, so this has been hanging on my wall forever. Can you see it?
Yep.
It's a Washington Post, Washington Business article from February 3rd, 1997. I think I told you guys my company partnered with AOL, and we did this thing called the Tacky Tourist. And in 1990, honest to God, we provided tourism information for DC because if you recall, in 1997, it didn't exist on the internet. You couldn't look up the Smithsonian and see the hours. So we put all that information together. We went out and we took pictures. And my deal with them was we would do all of this, but they had to, from 7 until 9 every night, figure out a way for people to ask us questions live. Mm-hmm. And so, again, 1997. And so here's my quote. The Tacky Tourist is what business on the internet should be. It's us providing a service to people and making some money off it.
That's actually
accurate.
1997.
Now that is still true, though. That
absolutely.
One that is absolutely still true.
And there are still people who struggle with understanding that that's what you do.
But seriously, if you read
speaking of the Lyft IPO,
yes. Hey, I bugged Ed earlier on before we had the chance to go live. I thought it would be kind of fun and interesting since we don't have Robert's curated list, which we never get to most of it anyway. And I only threw a couple of ideas out there. But one thing I thought that kind of irritated me, and Tim, you even heard me ask about it at Curate, was the preparation of downturn, or what really is logistically capably able to be done. About downturn. It's going to happen just inevitably statistically, whether it happens now, 18 months from now, 12 months from now, whenever. Eventually, our economies are going to shift in a pendulum swing, and it's going to be different than it is now. Sure. And from, Holly, when you raised that question at the digital marketing conference of how many people have worked in a downturn, and over half of the people in the room hadn't, then that meant okay, so how as an industry are we prepared, tactically, logistically, to really approach the project where the demand slows, that it's no longer just a line at the door or that there is perpetual growth, but how is it that we're going to do things? And I know from what you do with the influencer program, training program, a lot of it's about fundamental,
being proactive,
constructive. Yeah. Where you're out doing it, you're not taking orders, you're developing relationships and cultivating business, So I thought it'd be kind of fun since we don't have a spectrum of topics, to pull from. I mean, there's a couple other ones we can point at, but just to really talk about some real nuts and bolts, what do you do functionally about downturn business or downturn economies? And how, from a hotel or hospitality perspective, do you tackle the project? What do you think?
Yeah.
Or is that too heady?
I'm into it.
Because for me, my going back in the day, remember when, I remembered 9/11. And I was working in the Florida Keys. I was running 5 hotels. And it went from the road being backlogged with cars to you could stand in the middle of the road and wait 10 minutes before the first car came by, and it went from salespeople that just took orders and chose what was the better price to the phone wasn't ringing and nobody was standing at the front desk.
Yep.
And we went through that arduous process of culling the staff down. And after the 4th cut, when you're letting go the most important people that you ever thought you never would let go, and you're standing at your own front desk because you literally have terminated everybody else from a warm body perspective to stand there instead of you. How do you handle all that? And it was going back to basics and going back to teaching people back to fax machines and sending out that, where do you find business and how do you cultivate interest and how do you make people travel again when the world's telling you not to? I mean, it's a dramatic situation compared to what might eventually happen with our current economy, but downturn is downturn.
Well, and so let's be clear when we're talking about downturn. We're talking about normal economic downturn, not 9/11,
9/11, yeah.
not the financial crisis, and not the dot-com bubble. Okay.
I have a question about that, by the way. I do, and this is a legitimate question. I don't have an answer. I don't have a sorry about that. I don't have a specific point of view. It's more a concern, right? So historically, boomers were the largest generation. Today, millennials are, right? Or, again, I like to call them adults under 40, but nonetheless, they are the largest generation. There are more millennials traveling than there are boomers now. Boomers still spend more, but boomers are starting to age out of the marketplace.
Yep.
And according to research from the St. Louis Fed, millennials are poorer at this stage in their life than the preceding demographic cohorts were at the same stages of life.
Yeah.
So they're a smaller demographic and they have less money. Are we heading towards some systemic not downturn, but slow down in a way that we haven't seen before? I don't know the answer to that.
The fortunate thing
about that
for our industry is, even though the millennials have less money, and are not spending as much in general, luckily they spend more at their income level on our sector than any previous generation has. So while we will probably inevitably, I don't even want to say probably, we're inevitably going to head towards times of plateaus and shrinkage. There will also be, peaks and, I want to make sure when everyone looks at this, because fresh in anyone's mind are the disaster-based financial crises.
Right.
And so an economic downturn is not that.
Right.
That is a disaster. Right. That is a completely different type of plan.
I'm with you.
Yep. Yeah,
when you're,
for sure.
When you're talking about the healthy change in economy, which happens, you should always be thinking about what is the plan. And I can tell you right now, there's going to be a shock to a lot of people's systems, because hotels in times of good do not at all seem to be focused on bottom line. It's all top line growth. And so the painful aspect of that is how inefficient these businesses are and how they ignore key areas of expertise in their staffing that should exist for a business of their revenue level. It just doesn't exist in this space. Like, I look at it and I look at the fact that, my last business annual revenue matched that of some of my clients, single property annual revenue. And I look at the difference in staffing of expertise and entire areas that should exist inside of a hotel. I don't see existing. I don't see real talent being brought in these areas. And it makes me scratch my head, and it's all areas of digital. It's areas of understanding your infrastructure planning. It's, expertise in advanced forms of marketing. And you don't see the average hotel having anything near that level of expertise in-house. Let alone groups that should be able to easily justify it. They're not really looking for that expertise. And to me, that blows my mind, because in one hand, you identify that you very much dislike getting business from these big, bad companies that are very good in that area. And yet, on the other hand, you underinvest in your people that should be experts in that area.
Right.
Holly, you have expertise in two fronts to this. You have the sales training expertise you're currently doing now, and the training expertise you used to have for staffers and so forth. And here, it's basically saying that everyone's just taking the cash and running and hoping that everything runs. And even though the ship leaks, who cares as long as it keeps going as fast as it is? What happens when it slows down and starts to sink? I mean, are they going to? Because we always see, and usually what happens is they start cutting on the things that could actually help them: marketing, training. They start doing
First thing to go.
Yeah.
First thing to go.
And meanwhile, they keep afloat the things of the untrained and the incapable, and they wonder why they can't cost themselves into profitability. Is because they're not driving enough business to cost themselves above it. I mean, what do you think?
So I have been working with, and I think I can say the name of them, Accor of late, and I am incredibly impressed at how smart they are. I've had this theory in the sales world that what needs to happen within the sales organization of hotels is you've got to eventually develop a sales analyst. So it's not, and I keep sort of preaching this to people, and they're hearing it as a lead catcher. Somebody who catches leads, responds to people, fills out RFPs, and sends them out.
So inbound.
And that's not at all what I'm suggesting.
Because in a pullback, inbound stays.
Yeah, exactly. I think you need, in fact, for your organization, a real sales analyst, which is a much higher level, individual. And so I've been preaching this, and it's falling on a fair amount of deaf ears. And then I started working with Accor. They're doing it. I can't go into too much detail, but their level of analytics on the sales side is so much more advanced than I've seen. And so I'm excited. It exists. There are.
It exists
really
in smaller groups too. Like Auberge does a lot of outbound. And they actually have quite a few salespeople, not the standard type that you would think in a hotel structure. They actually have call centers of salespeople. And actually a lot of Navis customers
are more advanced.
Well, by definition almost, right?
Right. But the product that they provide allows a hotel to easily create an outbound sales effort. So,
right.
And it's surprising to me when you see the sophistication, and then when you learn from them, the revenue difference between their property and a similar property that does not outbound. It blows my mind that more properties haven't caught on to sales.
They don't need to right now. I mean, that's the problem.
Need to. Can we always need to?
In reality, you do need to.
Yeah.
Can we define terms for 1 second though? First of all, everything you're saying makes total sense to me, and everything everybody has said so far is right. And the reason is because when we're talking about hotels, we're not necessarily being clear about who we mean, right? Because you have an independent operator, you have an owner, you have a REIT, you have a group, you have a chain, you have a franchisee, you have a franchise, right? So I think depending on where you fit in the value chain, I think I would agree, Holly, with you that there are definitely groups and folks like that who are doing a very good job of this. I think when you talk about, individual owners or REITs or, asset managers or things like that, I think Ed is right that you often see them not invest in that because it's a cost, right? And so I think we need to be very clear about who are the types of groups that are doing this well versus who are the types of groups who aren't. Because I think when we say hotels do, it really depends where in that value chain we're talking about.
Well, and it comes down to actually what I talk about a lot, the difference between a hotelier and a real estate business.
Yeah.
So hoteliers, there are lots of examples of hoteliers that do a fantastic job at this. And actually the vacation rental world are masterful at this type of stuff because that's their bread and butter. And they're selling two different ends. They're selling to owners of the assets to, make their asset available. And they're selling to travelers and groups and all of that to bring them in. But still, you would look at that type of entity in the vacation rental world. That's a hotelier. That's an innkeeper. That is someone who has created a business around hosting people and housing them. They're not the real estate arm. Where in the hotel world, when you talk about REIT, when you talk about the entities that exist around a REIT, it's to take the fact that the REIT looks at it as real estate first, the operating business inside of the real estate as a nicety that services the debt. And then they hire out companies that should be operating the business, whether it's a management company, a brand, whatever structure of mix that they have. But when you look at hoteliers, I'm talking they own and operate. It's far easier for them to understand why they should be doing these things.
Right. So, and I would say most hoteliers, at least in my experience, at least the folks I'm working with, and I admit that is a somewhat self-selected sample, tend to do a good job of this in terms of investing at least within the limits, within the limits of their capacity, right?
Right.
But again, it is a self-selected sample because
and I think about
anybody who's hiring
actually
has the budget to spend on these.
This challenge in general is interesting because even when you look at the difference in the business entity and the staff who work inside of it, they have the same titles and they have completely different skill sets. So if you look at a director of sales and marketing that works at an independent hotel and compare them to a director of sales and marketing who works at one of the big brands hotels, there is a completely different set of duties, responsibilities, and even capabilities on how business is done. And so, this continues to make this industry unique and difficult because you have all these different entities, and depending on the mix of them, you actually have different capabilities come out of it.
No, this is just a funny thing. When I moved from Wyndham to the leading hotels of the world, right? And you have to understand, I'd only ever worked in the industry at Wyndham to that point. I will admit I was super dumb because GM, I was super dumb in certain aspects of the industry because of my experience to that point. A GM at a Super 8 was usually, and I'm not picking on Super 8, they were often very smart individuals, but they tended to be young in their career. And they were in an entry-level job for running a hotel, right? They were running a 60-room property, and they were 25 or 27 or 28, and they'd worked their way up from, being the overnight front desk person. Very sharp, but their knowledge and responsibilities and authority was somewhat limited. Versus the GM of, the Ritz London, who is the CEO of a $100 million company. So GM in that case means very different things.
So in a recap sort of way, three things that come out of this. One is that, Holly, you're saying there needs to be a hunter put into the sales team. What that ratio is to be determined, or no?
That's so funny.
You're saying there needs to be a scout put into the sales team.
Okay.
And I say an analyst. It's so funny. Ed actually interpreted it as outbound, and that actually isn't what I mean. I mean, I have seen over the course of my career, and this article actually just kind of solidified that. The better job you do, and nobody's going to disagree with this, with taking care of your customers, making that seamless, pleasurable experience, the more revenue, the more profitable hopefully you're going to be, but certainly the more revenue you're going to find.
That can't be right.
Yeah.
If that was right, most of this industry would be unsuccessful.
So one area where it never occurs to people that we should do this is in the sales area. So when I say a sales analyst, that's really what I'm talking about.
So you're talking about analyzing the processes that you take to make sure that it's as frictionless as possible for the traveling.
Precisely.
entity.
Applying technology and dividing up the workforce.
But it's not just technology. I mean, it's easy to say technology, but it's actually, in a lot of cases, it is thinking through
the process,
the core process.
It's 100% the process. But the beauty is today, back when I was doing it, we didn't have any technology. Today, there's technology that if you learn it and use it, it can streamline that to free up your hunters to do exactly what they're good at. It is hard to find a good hunter and a salesperson. And when you find them, it is such a waste of time to make them do this stupid RFP filling out stuff. It's just dumb.
So in a progression of right now, the economy is what it is chugging along fine. Positive numbers are still in play. So right now you're saying get this analyst person in to
and teach them hospitality.
And then And then when you begin to see where the horizon line is for potential downturn or economic shift, that's when you start making more priority for a hunter to come in and be a little bit more prepped, or no?
Your focus today should be on making that customer experience better. And then when the downturn inevitably comes, you're in such a far better position because you already have the systems in place. Hopefully you already have the hunter in place, who is in fact hunting. Aloranism.
TM.
So I think you should have hunters today, but I'm saying, really you need this analyst to be streamlining the whole process. So but on both sides, not just group sales.
But I also look at it as, like, if you're going to call someone an analyst, they should be analyzing things as well. And analyzing, that's why I went to outbound, because one thing I'll tell you, just from my experience when I was on the OTA side of the world and the advantages I took because I knew hotels weren't, one of the biggest things I built for the OTA that I worked with was I would respond to all the citywide requests for rooming proposals, because I realized that most of the hotels in the area were not responding to the CVB, giving them answers to this. So I would just go call a hotel and say, hey, I think I have a group, blah, 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 knowing that if they paid attention, they knew what group I was talking about. And I would get a quote and I would fulfill it and I'd get a cut. And so like this is going back to the basics of your process, understanding where business comes from, where you can get business from. Understanding business is not just group and corporate, it's also your individual leisure traveler. It's down to a traveler, and building the processes that are better at winning the ones you want than the people around you. It's not about keeping your piece of the pie, it's about stealing pie off the plates of the people around you.
Right.
100%.
So I want to get back to one other thing with you, Holly, but the second point I think out of this, there's three things I think we came out of the first part of the conversation. Second part is, and Ed, you brought this up, creating now the efficiencies of operational leanness, going through and seeing where you're bleeding money unnecessarily and tightening up your operational perspective so that you're not just spending from top line perspective, revenue generation, but you're actually looking at the flow through before it hits EBITDA, know where your cost factors are and put your parameters around what you're spending monies on. So that'd be the second thing. The third was a shared inference that between Tim and you, and that was get somebody smart about how to market yourself, how to get into the market and place yourself with what you know about your clients and your guests and so forth, and create those and
verify that what you know about your clients and guests is actually accurate to who your clients and guests are. Because I can tell you that is a misunderstanding that exists throughout this industry. So I'll give you a couple of my favorite types of examples. So hotels north of $500 a night, but south of like really high ADR, so south of 3,000 a night. All misunderstand who their client is. They all picture in their head their client as this jet setter, private jet, Saudi prince type person. And I have news for them. They book $10,000 a night rooms. They don't book budget south of 3,000 a night. But the understanding of that, you can see it in their marketing, you can see it in how they position it, and you can see how they pass over certain tried and true tactics because they feel like it's budget. But what they don't understand is, depending on who your target is, you are budget. So a $1,000 a night hotel is budget to the people they think they're having. So understanding, I ask now when I talk to a hotel, I ask the same questions to lead off every time. Why do people stay with you? Who are the groups? Like, why are they here? Do you fulfill that why to the best of your ability? And then how do you find them? I lead off all my calls now with those questions. And what's interesting is the ones who really know it, you can see it in their business. Their hotel does really well. The ones who struggle actually answering that question or disagree on the call, because generally I'm on with 6 people, the disagreement in the why people stay with you instantly shows like, okay, well, the opportunity is understand your why and sell your why. Don't sell your real estate.
Don't sell your why.
Sell your why.
Completely agree. I also want to go back to something you said a moment ago. One of the things I love about you, Ed, always is you stake out a position that is so easy to disagree with. I want to go back to something you said a moment ago. Everything you just said, completely agree. Completely agree. The one thing that I disagree with that goes back a little bit was when you were talking about, taking share versus growing the pie, right? I think that you have to have a healthy co-opetition with the folks in your market. And I think that the hotels that tend to do a really good job of this do, because the first thing you need to do when you're talking about stealing share is steal share from other markets. Then you fight over the share within the market, right?
And actually one of the best markets is the market Stuart's based out of. That's one of the best co-opetition markets I have ever encountered, where Myrtle Beach. They understand first and foremost, it's win for Myrtle Beach, and then
Hawaii
fight to the death within.
Hawaii's another one. I'll throw Hawaii into that mix as well.
I think Charleston does that. I think there are.
The Caribbean has started waking up to this.
That's right.
That's quite a bit, right? Because they've seen through the growth, they've grown, but they actually slipped in their share.
Right,
so year over year, they've grown through this growth, but they've actually not grown the amount they should have.
I also think Vegas does a great job of it.
Vegas is amazing at winning people to Vegas.
Well, that's because there's only 2 companies there.
Well, still, but still, they do a good job of it, right? I mean,
they don't co-opetition.
Oh, yes, they do.
Oh, yes, and Caesars.
Oh, God, yes.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Trust me, that's co-opetition.
That's their CVB.
Right, but
MGM and Caesars.
Who do you think makes the decisions of what the CVB does? It's those 2 businesses.
Certainly they have an impact. Okay. I disagree.
More than an impact. Way more than an impact.
So I'll go back to something a little bit more tangible on what some of the stuff that Holly was saying about some of the nuances of improving this analyst value proposition, because I know you can't share what you're doing in particular, but just in generalities of some of the things that they would be focused on. Are you saying that they'd make a big board of saying, here's all of our business sources, here's all of our techniques and tools that we have, here's how we segment out who's handling it internally? I mean, what's some of the functionality that goes along with this person's daily role as to how do they engage with the other team? How do they keep the hunter hunting? How do they keep the gatherers gathering? And how do they keep the operation satisfying guest demand for this?
So what I think is so smart about at least the groups that I'm working with within Accor is the integration. It's really everything that you've been speaking about, Lauren, the integration of marketing, revenue management, and sales. There's much less clear delineation between those 3 groups with this.
Well, and revenue. They have revenue very integrated into that as well.
I mean, it's just so smart. Yeah. And it seems a no-brainer, but man, it's hard to do. I had to interview, I'm doing some stuff for another company, and I am trying to figure out a business acumen class that's a little bit similar to the old simulator. Like, I really love that. Have you ever been through a business simulation class?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to have some aha moments, but I don't know if it's a great way to learn long term. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So I was interviewing some revenue managers about what decisions, when their salespeople come to them and say, I have this group, can I quote this price? What they wish salespeople would take into consideration before asking them that. And I was astounded that it was the same stuff that I wanted out of my salespeople in 1998. Like, we have a million tools today. I mean,
but see, this is the thing. A tool is only useful when there's a strategy.
Well, absolutely. But so back to this analyst position. That's kind of what this person thinks through. When you get
then they're not an analyst. What you're actually pitching is a strategist.
No, I think the sales leader or the revenue leader should be the strategist. You need an analyst collecting the data and you need the Mueller report for then, the bar to weigh in on. All right.
The 4-page or the 300-page?
Hopefully an apolitical analyst to provide the strategy with the data.
An analyst of sales strategy.
They should be an analyst of business.
Anyone want to shorten out what that would be?
You really want to say strategist, Ed? I know you do.
That's funny.
Anyways, so given the circumstances, you have this person in play. You have a operational team that is lean focused as to cultivating a bottom line revenue goal set. You have a collaboration, as you referred to it, Holly, of the marketing tangibilities to sales goals to revenue goals. You have this team. We're still talking property level. How does this translate up into all the fractions that we're talking about?
No, actually, I don't. I would pull a lot out of the property level, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I think, obviously it's going to depend on what entity you're talking about. If you're talking about an independent hotel, I don't know what you do if you have an independent hotel.
Really? In terms of, you don't know what you do if you're an independent hotel in terms of, sorry, I froze.
Streamlining your business processes. I don't know how you are able to do that.
It's exactly the same. It's just scaled down.
Actually, it's a bit easier because the goal and purpose is clearer.
Right. That's exactly right. And one of the great, so independent hotels have a huge positive and a huge negative, and they're the same thing, right? Often your strength is your weakness in many things, right? If you are a 85-room independent hotel, right? The downside is you only have the revenues that you can generate from an 85-room independent hotel. The upside is you only have to fill 85 rooms.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a 5,000-room group or a again, going back to my Wyndham days, a 500,000 room franchisor, filling 500,000 rooms is a lot harder. Right? Filling 85, you don't have as many resources to do it with, but you only have to fill 85 rooms. We looked, a client of mine that I work with regularly, who is a 75-room independent property, looked at Navis. And we liked Navis, and we liked everything about Navis. The problem was there was no amount of conversion rate that Navis could produce to cover the cost of Navis.
Right.
There just weren't enough rooms left to sell on top of what we were already getting. Right. And they would have been a plus. They would have been a real plus on certain levels and at certain times of the year. If we could hire Navis for a month out of every 12, it would have been great. Right. But the reality is, there weren't 100 rooms to sell to cover the difference that they would need to convert to actually cover the cost of the service in the first place. And that's not a knock on Navis. It's just Navis
isn't built for them. Yeah,
Navis is not built for them. That's not a crime in either
not
case.
Built for everyone. I mean,
that's exactly
there
right.
are hotels, and ours is a bit of a different dynamic because our price point's a bit lower. But it is
right.
The smaller your hotel, the higher your rate needs to be for us to make sense. So we have an 8-room property that just fundamentally kills it on our platform.
But they probably don't charge $99 a night.
No, they're over $2,000 a night.
Right.
So it's there. But we work with a hotel in Reno that is gigantic, but has a super low ADR.
Right.
And we probably run about the same ROI between the two properties.
Right.
And so it's for us, and actually I think when you inbound with us, we ask if your ADR is over a certain amount.
Because you did the last time I talked to you.
Yeah. And the reason we want to know that is because we also don't want to bring someone on that we know
you can't help
is unlikely to do well.
Right.
And yeah, so actually I have a call this afternoon with someone that we've said probably shouldn't use our platform, but they still want to understand that more. Because people are not used to hearing that. Well, they're not used to hearing it. Like, hey, you're probably not a fit. And here's why. And here's things you can do. We don't want to just say scram. But then they're like, well, wait, could we do other stuff? Yeah, you could. Do you want to? Right. That's the question. Do you want to?
That's actually a sales strategy that is taught.
No is the most powerful tool in a salesperson's toolkit.
Yep. Yeah. My 75-room property, by the way, that's how I landed them.
You said no.
I told them, I said, I don't think I can help you.
Loss aversion.
And I wasn't trying to be coy. I was literally saying, I want to make sure that you're going to get good return on this because I'd rather you not hire me than hire me and then say, we got ripped off. Right.
Okay, so I'm going to paint a scenario and see if there's an applicability to what we just discussed as to how would these people that would potentially be involved would tackle this. So if you have an independent flagged hotel in an ownership group.
Wait, an independent flagged hotel?
Just so a franchise.
You mean an independent hotel?
They have a brand, and they actually have multiplicities of them, but not a branded hotel.
So a small group. So like like an Omni or like a.
Oh no! I would even go even smaller than that.
What Kessler was before they went Autograph.
They have 3 hotels named the same. Let's say there's more than.
Okay. Like what Gaylord was before it got bought.
Okay, but not near the size. We'll say it's about a 250 room hotel.
Okay.
Okay. And it's with a larger ownership group that has a mixture of inventories and so forth. Okay.
Yep.
From an approachability point of view, from our conversation, how does a person within the superstructure of this and the large organization that is responsible for this hotel approach our solution process versus the property realizing that there's writing on the wall they need to make their changes? How are the two?
I have a problem with your terms. Right?
Okay.
And I don't know why I'm being like so big on defining terms today, but I am. To me, an independent hotel by definition is a hotel that gets to do what they want. If they're bound by some corporate structure that says, "Oh, we don't do that because that's not what we do," you're not an independent hotel.
The independent hotel
you may be a non-branded hotel that is run by an ownership group, but the ownership group sets a set of standards for you, but you're not an independent hotel.
Well, in this scenario, because I've come across it more than once, is the independent hotels have the autonomy to do what they need to do as long as the corporate entity agrees to what's being done.
So we're all talking about the same thing. What I think you're talking about, Lauren, is, there's a REIT or there's an asset management group or somebody like that who owns a bunch of properties, some of which are flagged and some of which are not flagged, right? And the ones that are not flagged have to play ball by the rules that are set up by the real estate owner. Is that
for the most part? Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you want to clarify for that purpose,
so those you have to speak in the language of the real estate owner. They're going to care about net operating income. They're going to care about pass through. They're going to care about those kinds of things. And if you can't sell it in those terms, you're never going to get to do it.
So from the perspective of the person,
because that's not how those folks make their money. Their incentives are aligned differently.
Yep. Okay, so the guy in the Crystal Palace sees the writing on the wall from where we talk. They have an epiphany of listening to our show, and they realize that they have to change their ways and take all this on.
Yep.
And you're saying until they can walk up to the top tower and say, "This is doing X for us money wise."
I'm saying they have to make a business case you have to speak the language of the people who sign the checks.
Believe me, I'm not disagreeing with you. But what is that language? What are we saying?
I'm saying talk in terms of net operating income. Talk about, what this does for you in the long run, right? Talk about it in terms of on the return on the asset. You're going to be able to sell this asset in the future for X as we invest today in Y. That's the way you get the folks who actually own the real estate to sit up and pay attention.
So taking the three things we talked about, finding an analyst that Holly mentions, defining a relationship between marketing and revenue management, and doing a good job of putting the communication experience to their future guests, and also operationally leaning down the cost efficiencies of the hotel. Those are all money conversations. So how is that different than from the property realizing the writing on the wall, talking upwards at that point, saying, I want to diminish my costs operationally. I want to improve my marketing strategy by expanding our guest base, by better at our marketing, and I want to refine our relationships with our sales teams so that we're better at efficiencies with the group business that we're doing. How do the conversations change in that sense?
Because they're not having that conversation today, because everything is so easy that you don't need to be efficient. You can just get lucky and continue to win business. That stuff's going away. So it's about the basics. It's about running a lean org where everyone understands the mission, everyone is aligned to the mission, and you're paying attention to bottom line.
Who's that person that can make that conversation happen?
The GM.
Okay.
The business leader,
when we're talking at the property, it's the GM.
The business unit leader.
And how far up in the food chain in the corporate world would you have to have enough Brasado to go over and be able to walk into a door and have that conversation with people above you?
I don't know that I understand the question. Say that again.
What responsibility level is a minimum for you to be able to walk in and make these points?
GM.
In the corporate world.
I mean, that really depends on this. That's a cultural question on the organization itself.
Sure, because everybody has their own culture.
It's probably not the marketing manager. Right.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a DSM, maybe the DSM, but usually it's going to be the GM in most
chief revenue
in
officer.
My experience.
How about a regional officer? How about a regional revenue guy or a girl or
again? It depends. Maybe. Are they regional
Yeah, I mean, this isn't
manager or are they
this hotel? They're responsible for the hotel we're talking about. So they're above that hotel for the revenue management success of it. Do they have the capability of being able to raise this question?
Depends on the organization. I mean,
first of all,
let's talk about the fact that when we talk about titles, exactly. And when we talk about titles don't mean anything. It's who has juice within the organization. Right. If I own hotels like that where the GM frankly didn't have as much juice as the DSM, and I've known hotels like that where the GM has all of the juice and nobody else has any because the folks at the next level up don't want to talk to the operation. They don't care. So it just depends on the structure of the organization.
So depending on who it is that's living with us,
it may not be a healthy culture when it is the case, right?
Yeah, if your culture is such that someone has to have juice to bring a well thought out question, challenge, opportunity into the org, you need to, before we talk about all the other stuff we're talking about, you need to fix your culture.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Correct. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, fixing culture from the ground up is really hard. It almost always comes from the top down.
Always. Yeah. I'm scared by companies that are overly pushy on like a manufactured culture, because what that tells me is the leadership is not exuding.
They don't have the vision.
Well, no, they're not exuding quality culture, meaning they're not.
Well, they have to adopt some pre-made culture. They don't have the vision of their own culture. They're like, oh, let's.
You don't need a vision. You just need to be a good person. I mean, it starts with that. Do right. You know, like you need to fundamentally be living a quality life.
And on cue, Stuart arrives.
Speaking of
quality life,
culture, our Australian friend Stuart.
Our sick Australian friend, if he gets on here, he sounded like death on a stick the other day when I was talking to him on the phone.
I said,
"G'day, mate."
G'day.
Hey,
good on you, Mike.
What's up? Hey, everybody.
Hey, we're talking about quality cultures, and you pop in.
Yeah, quality cultures.
Okay. You're
like in an AGOT dish, like when you're making a culture.
No. Quality of teamwork and interplay and positive environment and good communication skills and all that stuff. Seeing how field travel.
I was literally just talking to a client that was having some culture issues, and I was telling him about one of the philosophies I have with our team. It's one of it came from the South Carolina Gamecock coach a few years ago when they won the baseball championship, NCAA, and they had a lot of injuries and they weren't the favorites and they just found a way to win. But he had this phrase: it was win anyway. It doesn't matter what happens, just win. Just find a way to win. Right. So that positivity and that no excuses, and don't worry about the bad stuff that's going to happen, but focusing on how to win anyway. That's what we kind of do here at Fuel. It's fun.
Nice.
Win anyway, guys. Win anyway.
So where this was coming from was how should different entities of the hotel industry look at being prepared for a downturn? And so Lauren introduced, like we were talking simplicity from the hotel perspective about efficiency and, running lean, making sure everyone's aligned and understands the goals of the business and, are creatively looking for how they do that. And then Lauren goes, yeah, but how do you tell that to, someone up in the ivory tower? And we're like, well, if you can't, if you're the GM or above in responsibility, if you can't go to the ivory tower, you got to question the culture.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. But there is, unfortunately, Paul. Go ahead, Holly. I'm sorry.
Can I ask what else happened at Curate?
Oh, Tim, go ahead.
So there were two other speakers. Sorry, Holly.
No, that's what I was going to say. When I went the last time, one of the best parts were the outside speakers that they brought in. Who else did they bring in?
So they brought in two speakers. They brought in the chairman and CEO of
he was you're saying this person was impressive.
He was impressive. Actually, he was very impressive.
Lauren, help him out.
Blank on the group. Was it Gaylord or was it I'm stuck on Gaylord, but it wasn't Gaylord. Oh, Ryman Hospitality.
Right.
Yes.
Who?
Ryman Hospitality. So they own, a bunch of large resorts and things like that. And it was very smart in terms of, it was very much from the real estate perspective and really well thought out in terms of they do immense amounts of customer research. They're very clear on who their customer is. And they make sure that their resorts are located in such places. So they do immense amount of groups business. Obviously, as we tend to know, groups tend to want to move from year to year. You don't want to be in the same location every year. And so what they have specifically focused on, Ryman, for those who don't know, Ryman Auditorium, they own, which is where the Grand Ole Opry is headquartered. They own the Grand Ole Opry. They own the library from Hee Haw, the television show. And they see their customer, and they really given a lot of thought to this, as the country, what did they call country lifestyle customer, of which there are about 100 in the United States. And so they've located their properties in the kinds of places that folks who actually like that lifestyle look to go. So California, Texas, Florida, Colorado, Nashville, etc., right? And so they can move groups from year to year around to the different places. And, one of the questions he was asked is, where are you planning your next places? And he said, why would I tell my competition that? He said, we have 2 more planned for the next year, but we're not going to say where they are. But I would assume they're going to, again, be in those places, appealing to that lifestyle market. Speaking as somebody who is at least tangentially, which is odd for a guy from New Jersey, but at least tangentially part of that market, I'm a big fan of country music and things those lines. Everything he said resonated with me on a personal level as well as on a business level. I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. I get that.
The cool part was
very appealing, very smart.
Yeah, he was, and he knew his business. He knew his numbers. He knew his stuff. He knew why, and because he says they pour into this research first. They look at every nuance to this. I asked him I got to ask him a couple questions about data, and it was kind of fun to listen to his responses and so forth. Because I asked him, one of the questions was, do you go in preconceived with demographic personas and then validate the data that you're putting into those personas, or do you go from scratch and just look at your data and see what develops as interesting trends and comparisons? And they said that they pour over the data from zero. They go in and they build their structure of from everything. They don't try to say, oh, demographically, family size, income size, child ages, this is what they're interested in. Instead, he goes over and says, where are we seeing what we're doing, and how does that apply to who we want to do business with? And the other cool part, which I thought was kind of fun, and I've just noticed this as a trend recently, is where I would make personas and then validate the ad campaigns associated with what I'm segmenting. I always found, and I found this in Twitter first, Twitter ad campaigns, because you're able to selectively choose music, song, artists that people like compared to just genres. And when I amplify the persona with song segments or artist segments, I get triple and double the conversion value on my ad campaigns by being that selective, which is really weird because, going into the Margaritaville thing, Ed, you've talked about this before. When you start, instead of trying to guess what 31 flavors of brand like Marriott's doing, what's another brand flavor we can throw out there? What you're doing is you're taking interest categorization and then defining the product into that space. Like Margaritaville, like this guy's doing with his, they have a water park that they were bragging about that's just outside Nashville called Soundwave. And only the interior part's been open. They haven't even opened the outside park of it yet. And it's already, I don't know what the metric he said to him, but it was pretty astronomical, the growth of what their anticipated revenues were versus what their actual revenue was. It was, to the point where they're like, we're going to carbon copy this stuff all over the place. This stuff is crazy, and I was paying attention to that because of other people I'm dealing with. So, the identification of the interest and then defining the product in that interest category, it makes a lot more sense when this guy was talking about it than this, oh, here's flavored Bumvoy coming out now, like whatever. So it was a different twist. It's pretty cool.
And then have we made it a show since they came out with that brand where it wasn't without
I don't think so.
No, maybe.
Do you think maybe that was part of the plan?
If you consider
that we can talk about either of these. I'll tell you the other Curate discussion as well, and then we can decide which one we want to talk about. The other was the chairman and CEO of Warner Nashville. And I will tell you, speaking as somebody who worked in the music industry at the early parts of my career and knows more than a little about the music industry, I was disappointed in this one from an execution perspective. I thought Flo Lugli did a great job asking questions. I thought the guy's answers, he was a raconteur, like he would just go off and tell stories. And he was fun, and he was funny, and he was entertaining. He didn't do a great job of tying them back to the parallels that they've gone through and what the hotel industry and hospitality industry are going through. He was more to tell you my war stories. He was funny. He was entertaining. I thought the content was, unless you're either like me and have some experience with the industry, or you're a nerd in that regard and know stuff about the industry and I consider myself these days just an interested amateur. I'm not a professional in that industry.
I thought you were going to say nerd. I'm sorry.
I consider myself a nerd because, clearly I like this stuff, right? It's
Tim, I do have to say your signage is incorrectly sized to the scale of the wall.
It was a gift. That's actually a maze. It was sent to me by a vendor.
Oh, okay.
And it's supposed to be, hey, we're the thing that's going to help you get to success with you in the middle. And I was like, well, it's been leaning a closet door for the last 6 months. I really should just hang the damn thing up.
I thought it was a paint swatch for a while. I thought that was going to be the new color of your back.
Yeah, no.
Wouldn't metaphorically your logo should be on the outside of the maze and the person that's looking for a solution be in the middle of it?
Their logo should be on the straight line.
Yeah,
that goes to you.
Exactly.
Anyway, go ahead.
But you know, there are some striking parallels between the hospitality industry and the music industry. The biggest difference, and we don't have to beat this to death by any stretch, is most people don't realize what a record company actually is. You know, a record company really is a venture capital firm. They invest in artists. They know that 3 of them are going to fail completely. They know that 5 or 6 are going to make some money, but not a lot. And they know 1 or 2 are going to pay for all 10. And that's really what a record company is.
80-20 rule.
Yeah. And you know, so the parallels between the industry and the hotel industry are very similar, but the record company plays versus what the role a hotel plays is very different. I would say the hotels are more like the artist. Well, hear me out for 1 second. I would say the hotel itself is more the artist. And if you think about the artist today, the artist has multiple areas for revenue streams and has ways to go direct to customers that they didn't have in the past, and doesn't necessarily need to rely on the gatekeeper he had in the past, like a record company. However, if you can get a record company to invest in you, you know, a la a big group or whatever, it's going to give you access to capital to do some things you might not be able to do other ways.
The brand is the artist. The hotel is the concert.
I don't know that I would agree with that analogy. No, nah.
No, and actually both have been equally disrupted by the path that the consumer takes to consume.
Correct. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Like, that's what I was going to say, is there's a tight parallel. Both the consumer's path to consume the product has fundamentally changed. The line has become much more direct.
That's right.
Far less in the way. And both have struggled with how, with now this very easy way to connect consumer to product, how do you do that the best way? And both have continued to struggle with that.
And Spotify and Apple and folks like that are
the OTAs.
Or you are the OTAs. That's exactly right. It's exactly right. You know, so it could have been a really interesting session, and I really don't fault HSMAI or Flow or anybody on that side. I thought it was really, he told some fun stories, but he didn't answer the questions that were being asked remotely to the intent of what the question was trying to get to, right?
He probably doesn't know enough about the hotel space to be able to tie the parallel.
That may well be true, but I'll tell you, he told me that I have very strong opinions about the music industry as somebody who worked in it. Full disclosure, I think you guys know I was a music major in college. Technically, my degree was what was called music man. It was the study of the business of music, and everybody who came out of that program went on to work in record companies, or in my case, recording studios. And so I know more than a little about this, at least when I went to college, and then, you know, from what I paid attention to tangentially over the intervening, 25 years. Or
so back when the music industry was representing a minstrel with a couple of strings.
No, actually, back when the music industry, Seth Godin has a great line. The music industry, when I worked in it, and I'm definitely doing air quotes because back when I worked in it, had the best business in the history of business, because the product was the record, right? And the advertising for the product was the product. And not only did you get free radio play of your product, like the people who advertised your product advertised it for nothing. Not only did they advertise it for nothing, it was illegal for you to pay them to play your product. So, you couldn't ask for a better business, right? And what's fundamentally flipped, the fundamental truism of the music industry today, and there's no parallel that I can see to hospitality, is it used to be you toured to sell records, and today you sell records to tour. You make the money.
You make your money on touring. Yep.
Where it used to be, you didn't make money on touring, but you made a ton of money on the record, and that's done a complete 180.
Yep.
At any rate, the place where I do think there's a parallel, and I actually asked him this question, and he didn't give a great answer, was, the record industry had 15 years of declining sales. 15 straight years of declining sales, right? where they were just falling apart. And, you know, he said something about the fact of they basically ignored that. They didn't realize what was happening around them, and they kept investing into the downturn. And, you know, the lesson that they learned was that, you know, don't invest into a failing business, right? Into the failing model.
Don't put good money after bad.
Right. And I asked the question, I said, I'm having a tough time reconciling those two statements that you just made. You said you had 15 straight years of decline. Oh, what he literally said was don't invest into a dying model, right?
Yeah. And
I said, okay, you had 15 years of declining revenue. How could you not know it was a dying model?
And he said,
he told the funny
under his breath.
He told the funny story.
Yeah.
I asked it. I said, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm saying I'm trying to understand the lesson.
So you framed it with not to insult you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to insult you.
Correct.
In contrast to Tim's,
I said no offense.
Things. Okay, and this goes to kind of, I relate this to when I travel with Renee. She knows all these languages, and I don't know languages, so I have to go off on other cues. Like, you know, we're standing at an Italian train station. They're talking in Italian, and as I start moving, she's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "We got to go over there." "What, do you speak Italian?" And I'm like, "No, because everybody here is going over there." She's trying to listen to the words, and I'm just like, "Hey, on cue, everybody here is going there. Let's go." You know. So the same with this. Tim, you saw the insight because you knew the business. I'm watching his cues, and I'm seeing an older guy. The reason why they didn't do what they did because they didn't want to change their world.
That's right. No, you're absolutely right.
To them, he was the big dog, and people still did what they did. And I take that from two cues from this. Both guys, and they were in contrast, were nothing but name dropping. It was every other word was they're going to go with Kenny Chesney to do this, and they're going to go shooting with Blake Shelton tomorrow, and they're going to go have a barbecue with such and such the next day. And both of them, by the way that they talked, the way that they acted, their body language of how they sat, what they looked at in their stories of how they were on top of the world meant they were 15 years blind, this one guy, okay? That they just lived their life. They wanted to think the next year was going to be better until somebody knocked them off their hill. They were going to sit on top of that damn hill. And that's why they crushed and failed. And that's why 80% of their business now comes off Spotify. And that's what he said. 80% of his business comes off of this stuff now. They don't run their business. They run, like you said, they build product to make money elsewhere for it. And the other guy,
go ahead. No, please go ahead. I think you're going to go where I was going to.
No. So to me, it was just like, you know, this is the lesson I got out of it was like, be quick to make the fail and go to the better decision. Don't sit and try to create your world paradigm over and over. The world shifted. Salespeople do different things now. Marketing does different things now. Revenue does different things now. Talking about those changes is what's going to help.
Does different things now.
Yeah,
right. That's right.
Although the lesson I did learn about name dropping did help, because as soon as I started saying I was a friend of Ed and Holly knew me and Tim was my friend, shit started happening. People wanted to talk to me. They wanted to spend time with me. It was all cool.
And I think this is what you're saying. I do agree with what you just said in terms of I don't know that there could have been a more striking contrast between the two, in that I thought the guy from the record company was very much we need to find ways to continue to make money the way we always did, regardless of the changes, versus the guy who's the chairman and CEO of Ryman Hospitality talking about, we understand who Arthur is and we're making changes. I think the name dropping thing, and yes, they did do a lot of name dropping. Also, we were in Nashville. It's a celebrity town, right? I mean, don't forget, the celebrity is the product.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we talk about Expedia a lot. We talk about booking a lot. We talk about, Marriott
I know them.
That's
because I know them,
That's
right?
A very good point.
You know, they're merely talking about the best
even the record guy,
in their
made a joke that he didn't read his annual report.
Correct.
Remember?
But he also talked about the fact that they have a P&L on every single artist, and they know which ones they're going to drop based on the P&L makes any sense. So for the guy who didn't read his annual report, he was full of crap. He knew his numbers. He knew his numbers well. Right.
True to that point. No, the Curate program was a lot of fun. I mean, the speakers, they were interesting. The AI conversation, to your point, Tim, I think was a mixture of, there was some good points to be made. There is some traction to the conversation, but overall, to keep referring to Ed on this one, there is still a buzz factor to it. of applicability and lack of data usability in the market, so it makes it a challenge for it. So yeah, in that sense, but it was fun. It was worth the trip. It was worth, especially worth the sound studio. Holly, you missed this. We got to watch a band record. We actually got to sit in the studio with them when they're recording.
Get out!
Yeah, it was cool.
That's cool.
I didn't get through that. I didn't get there that night.
But man.
Was it country music?
I worked in a recording studio for 7 years, so I have a different take on it.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
I have some videos I'm going to throw up on YouTube for, but it was a crossover band. It's country and whatever else they do with that. And it's a new one called Juice. And we were in the studio when they were making the recordings. It was kind of fun because we can mix our own what we wanted to listen to out of each of the sources, which was kind of fun. And,
so Lauren was in there going,
well,
well, everyone else is like, I'd like a turn. And Lauren's like, get out of it.
No. Each person had their own headphone distribution.
Yeah, each person had their own. Yeah. Although I did wander into one of the other master control rooms, which I wasn't supposed to go into. Little did I know.
Touched everything.
Well, of course, yeah.
What's this do?
What's this big red button right here, dude?
He also grabbed the cowbell and pulled his shirt up above his belly.
Oh, I was there.
Ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding.
yeah. I had the cowbell the whole time in the background.
Yeah.
So what Lauren was playing with, this is not going to be all that sexy because this is the tiny little baby brother version of this. But what Lauren was playing with was the big brother version of this.
Yeah.
Little mixing board.
Yeah.
I got one of those in the corner of my room too.
And Lauren
We
needs.
can compare. Hey, show me that one again, Tim. That might be the same one I have.
This is the Behringer Xenix 1202. However, I used to fly a Harrison
that's
MR.
the same one I have in the corner of my room over there.
Is it really? Are you making that up?
No, he
No,
does.
this is what you use. This is what you use for your podcast, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if this will work, but
But if you
Let me
want
see.
to, if you want to Google a Harrison MR3 or a Neve VR6
somewhere over there.
You are telling the truth.
or a Trident Series 80 or on a couple of occasions, though I didn't spend a lot of time on these, an SSL-E series. I used to fly boards like that back in the day. The Harrison MR3 by far was the one.
Fly boards.
Sorry.
Lingo. We got some lingo going on.
Sorry.
This week, music.
I got some weird ideas just to bounce off you for some fun and some content.
I find this surprising.
I know, right? Because I wanted to actually, Ed, with you, I wanted to talk a little bit about why you're putting some consumer-generated content guidelines together, like that silly Skipped article that was useless.
Because it's the only thing about us that people understand, and it is the smallest part of what our offering is. So we tend to try not to lean too much into the UGC, because UGC alone is completely worthless.
Right.
If I shipped you 1,000 photos in a box, what's the value of that?
It's not. No. I'm talking about
It's
the
dependent
usability, the understanding of it, and the practicalities of understanding the value propositions. Most people don't think about the conversation. I've had this conversation when I talk about your product to any client. Is the translation of what it is to why it's valuable to them. They almost need the visualization to understand the value proposition, because they understand the concept, they understand the methodology to a certain degree, they understand the not buzz of it, but the influencer aspect of it. They don't understand the tangible.
Well, see, actually, they don't understand that. They don't understand the value of the user who generated the content.
In the purity of that statement, so it's the same. Yes.
They look at UGC as something they check as a box to display, and that is 100% the wrong thing.
Right. And UGC is a byproduct of what Flip2 does. It's not what they do.
And so that's the problem. And the problem is there are companies that aggregate, steal people's content, reappropriate through gray legal. I'll say it fairly. And they think that is doing something of benefit for them. And the metrics they use should be telling, because they use metrics like time on site to sell their value. They use, but if you actually look at fundamentally what's being done wrong with user-generated content, like, so so you would ask, why haven't we published something on user-generated content? Because it would be fundamentally insulting to the people who read it. Because reading it, you would hear that our firm belief is you are 100% doing it wrong in every single measurable way possible.
And,
and if we know one thing about Ed, he never likes to tell people they're wrong. Yeah.
I like to serve it more in a chip sandwich.
Here's my crazy zany ideas about content engagement and so forth. These are for small hotels. They're independent hotels. And a couple of things. One is putting together a e-brochure that breaks it down similar to the old magazine. Huh? As a pre-arrival. Puts in the pre-arrival. Break it down by segment of interest of cultural, culinary, off the beaten path, family adventure, soft adventure, and 36 hours in or something. It's part of the pre-arrival, just as a prelude to coming in. Here's some content to get you juiced up as the things centric to the location of the property, immediately around it for anything of interest based on those categories. That's one thing. The other was possibly doing a podcast, literally a one-shot podcast that's an audio that's kind of like welcome to the hotel, blah, 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 so forth and so on, that just gets thrown up, that you put in, that you it's an introduction warm-up is what it's for. The third is a video, but not a video that's a promotion video, not a come stay with us thing, blah, 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 but a video that takes your engaging staff members, people that know things about what you need to know, and accumulate them into a welcoming video, whether it be played on the TV when they arrive or as a pre-arrival part to it as well, or just as a downloadable feature for possible interest off the site that says, because of our location, because of where we are for what we are, this is what's immediately around us for this. The greatest Korean food since Korean was ever founded. You know, the greatest this or that. Yep. Those things of discussions, that's a content piece for that they can engage with. Of course, if it's a fence thing where it's on the website, of course, sign up for it so you can get it, or get an email to go over and create correspondence, those kind of things. Just, I don't know what, and the other was a book, an in-room book, where we put together a book about, there's some unique histories to some of the hotels I'm dealing with. That and the unique history about what's immediately in the area around the hotel. Put that together, but then the money's go towards charity. You make it dirt cheap, like $3 or $5. Take the book, and we'll just take the $3 or $5 and put it in charity.
These are all brilliant ideas and strategies, and every hotel should look at these things being appropriate for them. But understand that's not why my product exists. My product exists because these are all really hard to pull off. And make sure that they're delivered correctly.
Yeah. So this wasn't really what you're already doing. I'm just saying these just weird ideas.
But understand, these are all individually really good ideas that would drive really good impact if they were executed at some level of good. I'm not even going to say great or well or just good. No, and they would have a lift. And yet, you're pointing at some of the fundamental flaws in how hotels look at digital marketing. Your whole thing on an e-brochure about the area and all of that. Well, here's the thing. You can't even get hotels to do that on their website to market why come here.
Right.
And so yes, it's a brilliant idea, but I'd also argue, why isn't it happening everywhere it should happen? So many hotels are so focused on just the core of their building and not always the interesting aspects of it, that they forget that, people want to walk outside of this hotel. And most hotels, unless you're a mega resort over hundreds of acres, that's a destination in itself, most hotels should be positioning the market first. Sell the why come here. What's the adventures that are available for the people who are using us as home base? And then what's the value of us being home base? I mean, if you really look at how a decision is made, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Where's the best place for me to do that, to use as home base to fulfill those two things? Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I get your bingo cards out. I just posted a link to a blog post I wrote about a year ago. It was actually a column for Hotel News Now first. Ed, I said you're so easy to disagree with sometimes. On this one, you're so easy to agree with. I was nodding so hard a moment ago, I was going to give myself a concussion. The challenge we run into far too often, there's Calibri Labs research, other people have done similar research that shows, people who start at an OTA tend to book at the OTA. People who start at a hotel website book at a hotel website nowhere near a lot more than they do than if they start at an OTA, right? So people cannot book direct if they don't ever come to your website. And if they don't come to your website first, the likelihood they will come to your website at all is pretty much non-existent. How do you get them to come to your website? You have to invest in content. Hotels spend way too much time. They spend way too much trying to compete with the OTAs at the point of booking, which is a really stupid way of doing it. And you need to compete by being further up the funnel when people are looking to make a decision about where they want to go in the first place. So whether you do it with the content that you're talking about, Lauren, or whether you do it with the content that Ed talks about with Flip2, or ideally do it with both, you are going to put yourself in a much better position. And where I think too many of those make too big a mistake is they don't invest enough in the top of the funnel to get people to their website in the first place.
And I mean, actually, I want to go and just to go a little bit deeper on that point. The ones who do invest enough are investing it often on the incorrect thing. So when you hear, and I have clients all the time that are redesigning websites, and every time the website redesign is more about style and flow than it is about content. And so I've worked with hotels that since, as long as I've worked with them, they're on their 9th iteration of website. And yet the content is exactly the same as it's been. And so you're changing the frame of this, art. You're not improving the art. You're just changing the frame is what you're doing when you're redesigning your websites. Invest in the art. The art.
Part of that is because it's being commoditized. The website's being commoditized because you got folks out there like Tambourine that charge $200 a month or whatever it is. There's no upfront fee. And, you're investing more in a lot of cases. I literally was in an office one day talking about budget for website, and they were saying, I don't want to spend more than, I don't remember, $4,000. And literally on their desk was an invoice for their signage they just had redone outside of the front of the hotel for $65,000. And I had the conversation, like, which one of these two is more important to your business? Which one of these two is going to drive more? And I'm not saying you need to spend $65,000 on a website, but you need to change your approach, your attitude towards a website. Because if you are spending $200 a month or $3,000 on a website, you can't expect to have the craft and the time put into it to recreate the content and to think through it strategically. You are literally slapping up a WordPress theme and migrating content from the old site. So then I will
disagree to agree on one thing that Ed said. Process improvement is always an improvement. That is not a bad focus. The process of the usability of the site. I won't cite that that's a bad thing to improve, but to the bigger point that you had, transferring over the content as old content, you're just putting lipstick on a pig on that because content's being a bit of adaptive. And the real key element change that's happened is Google stopped penalizing folder depth. As long as it's guest user experience improvement, they don't care how deep that link is. They're not going to penalize you for that deep link. Now, I do give credit to credit's due. My crazy idea is, I forget which one I stole from you, Stuart, but it was the podcast or something. But you can, in your podcast,
yeah, you did.
A content piece. It made me think of all these other variations to it. That was like, well, why can't you do this too, and that too, and this too? So, to credit due, you guys were already talking about this before I came up with these weird ideas about what other content can be generated for the sites.
Yep.
Right. And but to Ed's point, it should come from strategy, right? It shouldn't be the idea is in isolation. It should come from what am I trying to accomplish with my guest? What am I already doing? And how can I iterate on that and improve upon that? Because you shouldn't be creating a podcast if you haven't got your email strategy down pat. Right? You shouldn't be creating a brochure if your PPC campaigns aren't maximized. So I think you've got to really start at it with a strategy and make sure your fundamentals are being done first.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking to a lot of clients right now about that podcast idea, just a 2 or 3 or 4 episode mini series of here's what you need to know before you arrive.
I even thought about it being a variation to the newsletter sends at a hotel. Because here's the thing, and this goes back to the very core of our conversation at the start of the show today: how to approach a downturn. These are the nuanced variations of things that if content is distributed correctly and distributed directly, you can influence that value proposition. Tim, to your point, they're not going to book direct if they don't go directly to your site. They're going to go to the OTA. If the OTA has the first and only voice in that conversation, all you're worried about is catching it at the very bottom of the funnel when they're making a purchase decision, you're going to lose out in the entire dialogue of what your value proposition is. So,
it's so funny. I loved what Ed said a moment ago, because literally I use the exact words in that article. I talked about, this is about investing in the painting, your property's content.
I said it that way because of that, Tim, by the way.
Oh, did you really?
So you were quoting Tim, quoting you, quoting Tim.
No, but I didn't realize that.
Inception.
I just thought you came to that independently.
Cody Ed. Wow.
No, I thought you came to that independently. But I mean,
no,
that's exactly right.
You use it a lot, so that's why I use
fair enough. All right. But I mean, that's exactly right. You have to have the right strategy, and then you have to say, what story are we telling, and what are the tools we're using to tell it? And a podcast is the right way to do it. Your imagery might be a right way to do it. Video might be a right way to do it, etc. But it starts with the strategy, and it then goes from that of what is the content that you're using and the channels you're using to deliver that content.
If we're talking about this, like, to anyone who scratches their heads about any aspect of your marketing, so like I hear hotels a lot say, like, we just don't get social. Well, do you get email? Because it's the same thing. It's a delivery method. It's where communication happens. The strategy is not all that different. It's just a different form of communication. A podcast is a different form of communication. A digital brochure is a different form of communication. Do you know what you're trying to communicate is the question that's most important, because in a lot of cases, even if they do, what they're actually doing doesn't line up with what they're trying to communicate. And they're so focused on the delivery medium that they're losing the point. And the point is, communicate your why. We'll go back to earlier today. Communicate the why. Why come here? Well, here isn't a building. Here is first a destination, and here is an experience. Then here is your location inside the experience of the destination. So if your site isn't doing that, then don't do any of the other stuff we talked about yet. Do that to your site first. Have your site sell that, explain that. Who are you? Who's going to have a great time with you? And why are they going to have a great time with you? Well, it's not just the stuff that's inside your walls that's going to do that. It's your neighborhood. It's the things that you're convenient to. And that's not a punch list with mileage, right? That's not San Diego Zoo, 17 miles from here. Well, is it the worst 17 miles or is it the best 17
it's on the
miles?
405. It'll be easy.
Right. Yeah, but this all too often is the stuff that's glazed over in exchange for the sizzle, which is how pretty is the framing and how pretty is the hero image that I put up, which that stuff's important, but the actual content and the story of the content is the most important thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But if we look at why that's happening, right? So the industry as a whole and marketing in general, not just in hospitality, has this checklist mentality. They have a to-do list of things that they need to get done. And what stands out to the stakeholders and the people that are spending the money and dictating the budgets is that sexy, sizzly stuff, right? So we've kind of created this environment where a lot of marketers, especially new marketers, are incentivized, all their incentives are pushing them towards doing the minimum on all of these things, but then focusing on 2 or 3 flashy things, because that's where they'll get recognition, the pat on the back, and a better job next.
Sure, and it's the short-term
solution to that. It is
at the expense of the long-term viability of the business.
But isn't that, in a nutshell, one of the biggest problems in the hospitality industry? Because we have so much turnover and people are always looking for their next gig, that they don't really care about the long term. All they're doing is trying to make a flash in the pan.
But also, we're flipping hotels so much.
One of your biggest customers has obviously figured out that issue.
For sure.
And I know that because I can see it across their entire marketing.
A lot of our clients do because they have little turnover, but the industry at large doesn't.
I don't even think it has to do with turnover. I think it has to do with the goal is to flip your hotel. The goal is to sell your hotel. How do you have a long-term strategy when your goal is to sell your hotel in 2 years? I don't know how you motivate your team to work hard to do well, so your hotel gets sold, so you get fired.
A real estate play and a hotelier. Hospitality and real estate. There are 2 different things. So I don't want to poo-poo on any of the real estate side of it, because as long as you accept your real estate and your business is real estate, then you know what? Quite honestly, you don't have to do half the stuff we're talking about because your play is real estate. So you do your real estate, and understand that it's a real estate play. And if you spend your money effectively, you can kill it. But that also means don't kid yourself. It's not about the hospitality. It's not about contributing to the locals. It's not about any of that. And so don't do any of that.
Right.
Do the real estate play. What happens too often, and I've said this many times on this show, is when a hospitality-centric business tries too much to act like a real estate business, and when a real estate business tries to act like a hospitality business, that's when the mess happens.
Right.
You know, because here's the thing. Do what you're good at. Do what your purpose is. Know why. Why are we doing what we're doing today? Is it to sell the business in 2 years? Well, great. Then focus on that and only do that, because it's only when you venture out into stuff that has nothing to do with that purpose that it gets messy and expensive and is a loss and a waste of money.
Word.
There you go.
Mic drop.
So I've been trying to leave since 10 o'clock. I have to go.
Oh, wait a minute. You brought the rut row, though. You got to talk about the rut row. You brought the rut row.
Oh, my gosh.
Well,
Unfortunately,
I got to go, too. You can talk about the rut row without me. But
Tim, it was nice
What
talking.
is the rut row? What is the rut row?
Here, I'll show you real quick. It's here. It's the link for the.
It's too bad we can't show it on the screen.
Hold on. Here it is. Boom, boom.
It's a sign on the side of a bus.
Got the H. Sorry, got the H in there.
It's get off in Thailand.
Get off in Thailand.
Tagline.
Yeah.
Fly direct from Brisbane to Bangkok.
Yeah,
And they try to claim that there was no hidden meaning in that.
Sure, I've got to go. Huh.
I really do too.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Tim, if people want to know more about you and Tim Peter and Associates, where do they go, sir?
TimPeter.com. That's where you can find everything. I am at TCPeter on Twitter.
And Holly, if they want to know more about influencer sales?
Holly at influencer-sales.com.
Excellent.
Oh, and by the way, Holly,
y'all.
I enjoy your content marketing strategy. It's really good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, I do too.
And Tim,
I appreciate it. Yeah,
get
Tim,
off to Thailand.
I've got to turn off your notifications.
You have to turn off my notifications?
Yeah, I don't know. Somehow I turned it on, and every time you tweet, I get a message on my phone.
Oh, yeah, you definitely want to turn that off.
Yeah.
Bye. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye,
guys.
next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right.
And then there were three.
Yeah, it's just us. The three.
Well, let's talk about the rut row. How much has time changed that we're talking about this from an almost negative standpoint? Like, it's funny. Get off in Thailand. It's really funny. It's not Thailand didn't pay for that message. It was AirAsia. It's funny.
And I mean, going back to, did you see Robert's email about his daughter? We talked a couple of weeks ago about the Albania campaign that leveraged Taken, and how, you know, his Gen Z daughter really appreciated that and saw it as tongue in cheek. And
the irony of
it's an audience for, you know, everything. And if that's their target audience and that message resonates, then, you know, fair enough.
On you, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Stewart's
I
people
don't think
say.
this one is as bad as that, right? Because that one was sex trafficking and stuff.
And
this
one was a area that's kind of known for that, marketing it about themselves, where this one is an airline saying, get off in Thailand. It works. It's funny.
Yeah, I agree. I don't get hung up on this one.
This isn't a painful one for me in that sense. And going back from an age perspective, there was a lot worse things that happened at farther times back that were very clearly meant to be biased as to their perspective as to the marketing strategy to it. That, you know, you can go back. I mean, and it's a terrible thing. You know, Mel Brooks, some of his older movies, you know, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, so forth. They can never be made. The old airplane movies can never be made again. And if you look at them, for all of our
I don't know. Have you seen Sausage Party? Because those types of movies are still getting made. Yes, they are.
But the idea of it is that there's time sensitivities to some things that are not translatable as
I think it's okay if you know what you're doing and you do not go too far. That doesn't hurt anyone. The get off in Thailand thing, it's
what I have a problem with is they try to play it down like that was not intentional.
Yeah,
that's
disingenuous. Don't lie.
Right.
I mean,
just own it. Just own it. Lean into it. Know who you are. Know who your audience is, and be unhub. As long as you're not negatively impacting someone.
And honestly, double down on it. Go, well, then
I would.
Why do people go to Thailand then?
Right.
I mean, that would have been a great response from the airline.
Yeah.
Well, their follow-up campaign should, grab some culture. Go to Bangkok.
Yeah.
But oh well. Hey, other than
which is more compelling, Yeah. Which is a better advertising slogan.
The only other link that I had out there that was of stuff just in general was the fact that the vacation rentals, Google adding vacation rentals into their mix of stuff. I thought that was a quiet announcement.
What are we, why isn't there more talk about hotels starting to try to figure out what they're going to do when Google starts encroaching more and more on their revenue model? Because we're still, and no one's even kind of mumbling about the fact that Google is like going head on into owning the consumer relationship on travel booking.
Hey, I'm pretty sure there was this podcast that did an episode called "Google is Becoming the Demagogue of the Hospitality Industry."
Who did that? Who did that? Fuel something.
Yeah, Fuel Travel, maybe. I don't remember.
Maybe them. Yeah, I remember that one.
No, it had something to do with gas. It was gas.
Fuel gas. Gas travel.
Gas travel.
Yeah.
Gas
no,
I don't know.
Here's what I think. I think everyone acknowledges this is a good possibility, but they're not freaking out about it. Because I think
not. But here's the thing: it's no longer a possibility. It's now probable.
It's reality, right? But it does
happening.
But here's the thing, right? It hasn't happened materially in their P&L yet, right? Because our industry is so slow to adopt technology. A lot of people still don't use Google Hotel Ads, right? So it's not as impactful directly to them. On their books, the revenue is still coming from the OTAs. Their percentages are probably going up a little bit from their dependence on OTAs, but they're not really correlating that to it being Google. So people in the short term are saying, well, we got another player now, so that's good. I'm increasing the number of distribution channels because now I've got Google and Expedia and Booking. And in the long term, they're saying, well, Google's going to disintermediate the OTAs, and that's good for me because Google's never going to charge me 20%. They'll get a smaller cut, right? That's the mentality that's being faced right now. And, it'll probably take 20 years, and we'll all be blindsided by what Google actually does by the time we realize what they actually did. So I don't think anyone's really thinking it through.
My scariest consideration out of all this is that people will begin to do everything through Google as it's being constructed, to the point that even though they're walking in our door at a hotel, we have no methodology of communication with them because every point of contact with that guest, say versus the physical at the front desk, is mitigated by Google.
No, but you're trying to get rid of that.
That's no different than the OTAs right now who create a fake email address, and that's the only way you can communicate with them. So what's the difference?
Unless you're clever.
Unless you have Flip too, and you nurture, and okay.
But what I'm trying to say is that our website turns ineffective because it's not being used. The method of communication with the guest in the house is with Google Assistant, which is not something we can control. That unless we actually grab them at the front desk saying, hi, we really want to talk to you in the future directly, and give them a reason that validates it, because they're like, why? I got everything I got already with Google. I don't need to talk to you again. I don't need to be bugged by your incessant white noise garbage marketing and constant iteration of why you want me to contact you again. When I want to come back, I'll go through what I did to get here the first time, which is Google. Leave me alone. And by the way, take that damn $65,000 down. You don't need it anymore.
The asset that is most underappreciated inside of a hotel is their relationship with their guest.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like they don't invest in it correctly.
I
don't think they understand the power that can be if you have it just hammered out. And Stuart knows this. This is the value Stuart's company unlocks for a lot of their clients is better maintaining of that garden and, yielding of the harvest of it, not completely destroying the earth underneath it. So when you look at that, like how should you be looking at Google potentially moving in here? How should you be looking at the threat of Airbnb? How should you be looking at how to lessen your dependency on the OTAs? The answer is all the same. It's have a better relationship with your customers and your prospects. Because, by the way, prospects eventually can become customers if you put enough effort into the relationship.
Well, I think, and we talked about that last week on the show, that you really, as soon as someone makes contact with you, whether that's visiting your website, picking up the phone, whatever it is, you need to treat them like that they're your guest at that point. You're working on that relationship. You're always working on the next day.
Yes. And like I said, I feel like I'm trying to hoard water before the well runs dry. To me, the more I can get data of engagement with my guests before that door closes or that well dries up, because Google says, yeah, we're not going to let you have that direct communication anymore. Everything goes via us, through us, with us. And unless they're actually standing at your door where you can actually talk to them physically, you're not going to have any method of communication that we don't control. That's the part I'm worried about.
I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. They haven't really done that.
And every time that happens, something else will pop up to give you the side path around to, not have to completely shut off. Now, that being said, it's going to hurt the OTAs first.
For sure.
But don't think that's not going to ultimately end up being painful to the hotel. And don't fall for the stuff. I mean, so this is, again, coming back to your content and selling your area and your why. Like, the OTAs have kind of convinced hotels to commoditize a lot of their sale process. And they're doing that because that's how the OTAs want to present hotels to travelers, so travelers don't see value in the things that actually make a hotel interesting. Don't fall into that trap. You need to sell the value of your property. And the value of your property is more than the building itself. It's more than the location it's in. It's inclusive of the people who make it happen. There's so many nuanced layers to the value of your property. And if you sell that well and you present that well, you'd be amazed at the benefits of it. The benefits are you can get return guests at a much higher rate. You can spend less to get people to come and stay with you, and you can charge more for it because people understand your value proposition.
Right. But also keep in mind, when we talked about history and so forth, it's maybe a little over 10 years ago that there was a paradigm shift of market strategy that hotels took from trying to internalize and ignore the outside world and try to keep internal capture to their food programs and their amenities and keep people in their hotels, to the now let's talk about everything around the hotel, because we irritated so many hotel guests by not knowing, letting them know the biggest ball of twine was next door, that, they are mad at us because we told them our restaurant was the best one to go to, when really it sucked and the best restaurant to go to was next door.
But that's the point, right? Because people were looking at making decisions that were in their own interest, not in the interest of the guest. And no relationship can be successful if you're selfish. You've got to look out for the partner in the relationship first before yourself. And so just telling people my restaurant's great when it sucks is going to erode the relationship. It's going to erode trust. So you've got to be honest.
The room while you were talking. Did your wife walk in the room?
My wife is the most important person in our relationship, for sure.
That's exactly right, damn it. That's right. Happy wife, happy life.
It's right. I mean, this is it. This is the bottom line. This is how you weather downturns. This is how you stay resilient against changing consumer demand, is fundamentally treat your customer like the most important aspect of your business.
So that means you make decisions that favor them, not your P&L. So, for example, and I just had this conversation with a client where they have an operations guy who's all driven by the bottom line. And if he's told to reduce cost by something, he'll go out and, without really thinking about the long-term consequence, will find a cheaper provider of linens or something like that, right? Great. This month, your P&L looks better because you just saved on your cost line. But what happens to the customer relationship when you do that? Now, the beds aren't as comfortable. The towels aren't as fluffy. That's going to erode the relationship. That's going to lead to negative reviews. It's going to lead to lower ADR at the end of the day, lower repeat business. Everything Ed said you should be doing, it has the opposite impact. So you've got to really weigh up every decision with the light of, is this going to help or hurt the relationship, and go into it knowing sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to make a decision that might compromise something, but you at least have to go into it with that knowledge.
Yep.
But it's not just the relationship, right? It's also the product. The experience is not the relationship is key in terms of the interaction, but the relationship is built on the experience, which means deferring maintenance, not investing in amenities. Those kind of decisions as well are critical. You got to make sure you are investing the right way.
So speaking of amenities and weird quirky things, I'm just sharing all my little wacky ideas today. So for Easter, I have one of the hotels in New York. We're first off giving everybody during the Easter week a little amenity for Easter, little Easter egg candy.
Are you dressing as an Easter bunny and go into the property, Lauren?
No, that's only for my wife, and that's some.
Are you trying to identify the people who actually won't be offended by that? Because
yes, it is.
There's entire segments of the world that don't.
We're right next to a synagogue. The idea is this: if they're staying during Easter, and they're booking the Easter package, which is what this is connected to, we're figuring they're going okay with the chocolate eggs. The other is that we're also doing Easter hunt in the hotel where we're putting different prizes in different places, and primarily in the safe boxes of the hotel and so forth, that are rewards for like a free night stay or a dinner at a local restaurant and stuff. We have a series of them through there, and we're rotating them through for a few days during the Easter holiday as a way of just saying, hey, you're with us for Easter, so let's appreciate the fact that you're here.
Where is this property located?
New York. New York.
You don't anticipate any pushback on the Christian values that you're trying to
that all up on the conversation over and over, and literally across the street from one of the most historic synagogues in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's the Easter package. We're only doing it with the people that buy the Easter package.
Okay, there you go. So they're making a conscious choice.
Yes. Or you can at least say, listen, you booked a package that says Easter. I have nothing wrong with that, like self-select.
That's what it is. If somebody comes down going, hey, I'm this religion versus this religion and I don't appreciate this, be like, you did buy the Easter package, so you like Easter.
You should always talk to guests that way. You should always be a smart ass to guests.
I highly recommend.
Yeah, of course. Just like we do all of our TripAdvisor responses. You know, when somebody says something bad, we just come back and it's like, whoa, okay, yeah, let's build an extra building for you. Sure, that's what we needed. No, just kidding.
Why don't you send us a picture of your bedroom and let us know what we're working with?
See, now
how clean is your toilet?
I thought it was a wonderful, fun thing. It was like one of those little things.
I was just curious, like, how you were going to.
Hey, I was the one that just did what you did. I was the first one to raise the question. We come up with the idea. It's like, oh, let's do this. Wait a minute. We're right across from the synagogue. And we're like, well, if it is the Easter package they're buying, I'm guessing we're going to be okay.
If they're opting into an experience, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's just it's Easter. We're just doing a reward system for it. So
yeah, but I still think you should dress as the Easter bunny and have kids come sit on your knee and take photos. I think it'd be great.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking that might be a career choice for me.
Now, it's been killing me the whole show, and since no one's going to make it to this part of the show, what's with your face?
Oh, I decided to. Okay, here's my story. I didn't put the right amount of creamer in my wife's coffee while I was drawing her bath, and no, actually, I slipped and hit my face on the side of a wall.
So you bumped into a wall?
Yeah, pretty much.
With your face
first. Face first.
Well, that sounds like someone that's like trying to cover the true story. So
no, that's actually the real story. That's the real story. I actually did.
Fell downstairs. Yeah, exactly.
No, I wish I fell down the stairs. At least there'd be more marks and scars and stuff. This was just a.
You weren't struck by lightning again, were you?
No lightning involved in this one. Actually, we've been having awesome weather down here. It's been beautiful. It's like dang, no winter, but just nice weather.
All right. Well, why don't we wrap it up?
Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Stewart. Are you doing the recording today? Are you going to do it?
We are. So we've decided we're going to do a series of episodes on fundamentals. So today we're starting with email, and we're going to really do some 101 stuff, like really get into here's what you should be doing from beginning to end. So I haven't seen the note. Pete put the notes together for the email one, so I haven't looked at them yet. But yeah, I think we're going to go through like PPC, analytics, probably a social one. So yeah, we're going to do that, but we're not going to do it every week. We're going to intersperse. And next week's episode that we're going to record, we're actually going to have two special guests on it, because we did a kind of introduction to influencer marketing, I don't know, back in October, but feedback we got was they'd like some more tangible hands-on examples and case studies and stuff. So we reached out to some experts on that, and luckily we knew the experts over at Flip2. So,
which is not me, by the way.
No, so we got Ricky from Flip2, and then one of the folks from Navis are going to join us on the show next week. We're going to record it next week. It'll probably be published the next one, but we're going to do a dig into influencer marketing next week. So that's what you have to look forward to.
Now, email this week. Are you going to go over and to discuss workflows, content insertions, things like that, and all that kind of cool stuff?
I haven't seen the notes yet, but I would imagine it's going to be, list health and, strategy and
Nice.
what you should be sending, triggered emails, things like that. So, yeah.
Very cool.
That's what
And
we're
if they
doing.
want to listen to your podcast now and in the future?
Yeah, so fueltravel.com/podcast, or anywhere on the internet, you just type in Fuel Travel, you'll find us. Or Gas Light, something, I don't know. What was it you said earlier? Fuel
Gaslighting.
Gas Travel.
Stewart's
Fuel
gaslighting
travel.
the industry.
Yep.
And Mr. Ed,
True
for those who
story.
want to know more about Flip2, where is it that they may go?
You can go to Flip2. That's flip.to. LinkedIn, Edward St. Ange. You can find me. Facebook, if you're actually a friend of mine. And then I've stopped Twitter as an
You
experiment.
stopped it, really?
Yes.
What's the hypothesis you're trying to prove?
I'll discuss it later. It's interesting. though.
Okay.
All right. Well,
So there's that. And Lauren, if people want to see you and your slightly scuffed up face, where should they go?
well, they can see it on this one, but they can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There is the link to this show notes, as thin as they might be, since we are missing our wonderful advocate Robert as his travels to North Italy. But all the other remaining 189 shows prior to that have much more robust content than the short, paltry list that I had put together. You can see all of those things as well. And then we will be show 191 next week. We do have a potential guest co-host with us next week, which is, we'll see what happens. They wanted this week, but it was a little too short notice for us to throw it in. So I want to try to do it next week.
We literally had nothing to talk about this week. This would have been a great week.
I know, but you know what? I was selfish. I was like, no, I'm going to hammer down on the whole downturn thing, man. I want to front you down. And I thought we got some good stuff out of today's conversation. I thought we made some really good points.
See, Lauren was looking out for himself, not for our listeners, right? That's
what it was. It was a total self.
I do think it's fun that you put the letter S after listener.
I think there's 7 of them.
Comma S, comma listeners. All right,
our listeners.
Parenthetical S. It was it.
Exactly it. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time as always. And for next week's show number 191, 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central, 9:30 Pacific time, and 6 hours ahead if you're in Europe, and 12 hours behind if you're elsewhere. Or wait, we might get Dan Waxman in sometime. You might want to join. He was
neat.
5:30 in the morning though is his barrier. He doesn't want to make noise for his family to wake up, so he's trying to find a place that has good Wi-Fi at home that is also quiet enough that he doesn't wake his family up at 5:30 in the morning to join the show. So
did he just move jobs? Did I?
He is on his own. As a matter of fact, hold on, I'm staring at his business card, which I have some critique of, but there we are. There's Mr. Waxman.
Nice.
So he's consulting now.
Yeah, and then there's his description of other stuff on the back.
Wow, that looks like one of Robert's slides.
Doesn't it, though? You know,
it's a lot of information.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff there. Anyways, gentlemen, thank you as always. Thank you, everyone, for the listener that joined us today.
Whoever you may be. Mom.
Luis Hippolyte. All right. To that end, thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you next week, show number 191.